Hello, everyone. This is Rob Wagner from Implementation Specialists, and I'm going to be doing a presentation today on using automation to free up your time. And I understand right now that you're all on mute, and I can take you off mute, and we can discuss these things at your convenience. What I'd like to do is just to make sure that everyone can hear me okay while we're getting started here. If someone could use the chat window to confirm that they can both hear and see my screen, then we'll get started. I do appreciate you taking time out of your day to attend today's webinar, and hopefully you'll find some tips to take home to your Dynamics GP team of users and find ways that the automation can be used to get stuff done and free up time. So, can everyone hear me? Can anyone reply with the chat? Maybe you can't hear me. And I do realize we're right on the top of the hour here, so I will be mindful of your time. We probably won't take the full hour, but if you want to ask questions and do additional investigation, we can do that. Okay, I did receive confirmation from Alana that she can hear me, so that's good. I will go ahead and get started then. Welcome to today's webinar on using automation to free up your time. My name is Rob Wagner, and I'm a senior technical engineer here at Implementation Specialists. Prior to my career here in the consulting world, I worked for Microsoft on the GP team, and have a lot of experience with automation and how it's used both inside and outside of the product development lifecycle. And so what I'd like to do is show you a few things that you can take back to your team or yourself that can help you every day with automation. So what you should get out of today's webinar in just a few minutes is a quick learning about automation, also automations by type, what are the different types of automations, and we'll see some of those in action. We'll talk about the pros and cons of automation and how it can be beneficial. And then at the end, when you raise your hand, we'll be able to answer any questions you might have on the presentation. If any time during the presentation you find that you want to stop me, please just raise your hand on the webinar, and I will make sure that I take a break there and answer your questions. Otherwise, we're going to go forward. Thank you for taking this time. So automations are a series of commands that are playbackable or recordable and then playbackable. So that's what the name for it. Recording a macro, replaying back a macro. That's what automation is all about. Most people think of it as a robot. And while it can be like a robot when you're automating things, it's more a series of commands that are telling the system to act like you're intending it to do. So these are the steps that you would do to enter some data into the system, to post some work orders, to create a batch, to do anything within the system. Anything that you do from a user standpoint can be recorded and then played back. There are some pitfalls. What can't a macro do? Well, it cannot stop and let you respond to user interaction. So it has to be predetermined what the macro will do. Other things that it cannot do are react to changes in how the data appears when you play back the macro to the system. And the common example for that would be if you use a lookup in a macro, then the position that will be recorded will be the position in the window for the line selected. However, if additional items in that lookup appear above that, then you won't be playing back the same item number. So we strongly encourage, and actually it's a key learning, to type the data into your window as opposed to using a lookup. Another pitfall is there's some copy and paste functionality that's there, and if you use that when recording a macro, you will have to make some manual edits, and we'll go through that and look at and see what that looks like. So in order to be successful with automation, you really need to practice. You need to spend some time, and I recommend using a test database to be comfortable with what you're doing. And it really just becomes an exercise in becoming comfortable with automation in order to be successful. And know that an automation, when it doesn't go right, when you're recording and playing back, it's not something to worry about, that it's never going to work. It actually can work, and it just takes some patience. And a number of people have had great success with automation, and so I would like to help you get to that point. As I mentioned earlier, automation is a predictive and repeatable set of instructions. And this set of instructions can be used by anyone that has Dynamics GP. So there's not any additional licensing that you need. It's part of Dynamics GP. And it's part of every user's client. So when you do things that are on a repetitive basis, like every day I do this, or every week I do this, every month I do this, and it takes me how long to do this, think about how long it takes to do those tasks and whether or not automation could replace that valuable time and free you up to do less repetitive data entry type operations, because time is very valuable. They can be scheduled through a timer, and this is something that we'll demonstrate towards the end of the presentation. And really, every combination of steps that you would go through is recordable and replayable. And as a matter of fact, Dynamics GP Web Client does use automation to communicate between a web browser and the GP instance that it's talking to. So the last point really is to let you know that automation isn't going away anytime soon. It's something that's been around from the beginning of the product, and it is being well maintained and will continue into the future. Okay, so what are the types of automation? And these are just the names that I've come up with. You can call them what you want, but a seed macro is something that I use to identify kind of like a starter macro. It's a piece of a larger set. It's a seed. It will grow into a tree, but it is a pristine set of operations that can be repeated just once. And we'll show how that will be used to automate the repetitive task. Another type of macro is a startup macro. And these macros will be run when you start Dynamics GP. So we'll show an example of that as well. A quick command macro is something you're in a window or you're at a spot and you always have to do this. I go down here and I click this and this and this, and then I can assign that macro to a key command or a quick command, like a Shift F4, Shift F7, Control F7, any of those combinations can be assigned to a command. Then when you want your macro to run, you just click those keys and the macro will do its thing. Mail merge macros. This is part of a way to get data into the system that uses a seed macro and an Excel spreadsheet. The seed macro is in Word, and the Excel sheet is just sitting there pointing to it. Word points to the Excel, and then we'll do a mail merge to generate a massive amount of commands that are basically a copy of a seed macro n number of times, one for each row in the Excel sheet. And then there are timed macros, which is kind of the last step in the demonstration, which shows how macros can be generated on the fly and played back on a minute-by-minute basis. Okay? So startup automation. Every day I get my coffee, I log into GP, and I go create a batch with today's date and my initials for sales, purchasing, inventory, payroll. This is something I do every day. So why don't I create a macro that when I log into GP, it automatically does this for me? So I can just start GP, and then I'm ready to go because today's batches have been created. So we'll show that in a demonstration. Next, we'll go into a quick command. We'll do one of those. As I mentioned, these are assigned to a shortcut key. And the mail merge one, I'm not going to go into detail because I want to get into the demo here, but we will go and add new inventory at the end of the month. A common request that we've seen is I get a new set of inventory from my supplier and I've got to go and enter all these items and it takes me a day to get it all done at the end of the month. So we'll show how that can be automated. And then we'll do some timed automations, and the example I have today is courtesy of one of our customers, Dakota Western Corporation, who has a series of automations that create MOs, MO receipts, and sales orders. So that's the end of the presentation as far as setting up the demo. So now we're going to go into the product and walk through a couple of these examples. So I have Dynamics GP here, and I see this. I have my Good Morning batch, and that is the batch that runs to create a batch for each user and each day. And how did I get that batch? Let's just take an example of how to record a macro. So if I go into Dynamics GP, Tools, Macro, Record, at that point it asks me for a name. So I'm just call this Webinar Sample 1. Whatever I do at this point is going to be recorded to that file. So let's just do something that we would normally do. Transactions, financial, batch. And we're going to put in a batch here called webinar and make its origin general, put in a comment, and save the batch. Close the window, and now Tools, Macro, Stop Record. You could see that you can use shortcut keys here. Alt F8 would be that command. So now, if we go look at that file, we can see its contents and look at what makes up a macro. So anything that has the number sign or a hash mark at the beginning of it is indeed a comment. So that line does nothing more than tell you that this is what version I'm recording in. And so I can go in here and put comments into a macro. If it's on a line with the pound symbol on it, then it is going to be ignored by the system. The next one here, command exec dictionary default, command financial. Now, most people aren't going to really care about all the details of a macro, but the important thing to know is that there are a number of commands. They do a number of different things, and this particular one opens that GL batch entry window. And so in order to figure out where the windows are, you could record and look at them, look at that first command. Another pitfall that I forgot to mention earlier is when you use something like this and Tools, Macro, Record, Webinar Sample 2, and I click on batches here, I get the same thing. However, that will only play when you're positioned on this area page, and you may not be. And so if I were just to shut down this macro and open it, we could see the differences in the command to open it. That one says click hit IE area page 53, and so that is going to work when you're sitting on this page and you click to open it. But when you go through the menu, transactions, financial, batches, and do it this way, then it'll work no matter where you're starting from. So I recommend we use the navigation on the top of the application when recording anything for that purpose. The other important thing to note about recording macros is you always want to open the window, do your stuff, close the window, and then save. If you were to open the window and then enter 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different things, then close the window, then you don't have a repeatable set of tasks because you opened it, you did more than one thing, and then you closed it. So there's no harm done in going through the navigation, opening it, close it, and then you're just opening it up and it'll open very quickly. So rather than opening a window, playing in 100 items, and then closing the window, we'd open the window, put in an item, close the window, open the window, put in an item, close the window. Okay? So what does our Good Morning Batch macro look like? So in the application, we have this shortcut group called Startup. And in there are the set of commands that will be played each time an application is started. And so This one right now, I ran it manually by clicking on it, but if I were to stop Dynamics GP and restart it, then it would have done that. And what it did was pretty simple. It went into sales, batches, and it created a batch with my name. I'm logged in as SA on 4/12/2017, and it created this batch for me. So what does that look like? Okay, so at the top of the macro, you'll see this line that I added. I actually typed that in there. And what that does is it signals the macro system to not report when it's done. So by putting the line logging file equals whatever, in my case I just called it foo.txt, then when the macro completes, it doesn't tell you it completed because it's just an OK dialog box. So that's how you can get rid of that. And what it did is it went into the login window. It copied my login ID with a select all, and then it canceled it. Then it opened up this Command HR window in Notepad, and it pasted it. And then it went through and opened the date, switch date window, and it copied it. Command select all, copy. And then it went into the same window that had our user ID, and it pasted it. Then it goes into GL, SOP, receivings, and it pastes that into the batch number and saves the batch. Okay? So that is the startup macro. And next we'll look at a quick command macro. So the common scenario is, and I had it down in my notes as in purchasing, but it certainly applies to any area, where I want the window to look a certain way when I open it. So I'm just going to open the window to show you what it looks like now. So if I go transactions, purchasing, purchase order entry, and I look at the window, this is not expanded, but I want it to be, so I can read the window second line items. Also, I want to view in the vendor item. So then when I do that every time, it looks like this instead of this, which is the GP item. So if I were to open the window normally, it would not have this expanded window, and it would take the default, but in this case I want to switch it to display vendor item. So to get that to happen, we're just going to record a quick command macro that does that. Tools, macro, record, webinar sample 3. And we open the window, transactions, purchasing, purchase order entry. And then we go view, display vendor item, and then we show details. Now, the window is open, and my macro is where I want it to be. So now I want to stop recording. So tools, macro, stop record. And then I can close the window. So we want to add a quick command for that. So that goes to this shortcut bar here. And I'm just right-clicking in the shortcut bar area to go add macro. And then I just pick the file that I just recorded. And I can give it a name. We'll call this PO window Rob. And down here you'll see a number of shortcut keys that I can assign to that macro. And as you use them, they will disappear from this list, but they provide this number of commands out of the box. So if I assign that to an F2 and hit add, then when I click this button here, it does what I just recorded. So I might not be on this window. I'll be over here in sales. And if I hit F2, it still worked. So I didn't have to click on it in the add shortcut area. I just clicked F2. And then if we look at our PO, there we're looking at it, and we're looking at it in the vendor items image. So that's a quick command macro and the startup macro. And the next one is a seed macro, a mail merge macro with a seed macro. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter some inventory items through a mail merge. So to start that, I need a seed macro. And what I'm going to do, tools, macro, record, and put in webinar sample seed 4. Then we know to enter an item, we go cards, inventory, item. And we're going to put in a simplistic item number and fill out our automatic fields. And we'll pick a class of finished goods for this item. All of our items are going to be finished goods. And from there, we know that we need to enter a site for this inventory. So I'm going to navigate to the site window here and assign it to warehouse, save, and we also know that we need to buy this thing from a specific vendor. So we're going to buy this from Adam Park. I could get his correct spelling. And now I'm recording all these extra clicks because I can't remember what his name is, and that's not good. But is it fit? Oh, for crying out loud. Let me look it up here. And so I just broke the rule. It's advanced. Oh, I was using customers. Okay. So advanced 001. My bad. So in that case, you know what? The macro is probably not good. So this is something that we'll just go ahead and get rid of. I'm going to write down what I'm going to use. Of course, I'm trying to use vendors when I'm using customers for vendor names. So, okay. So then tools, macro, stop, record, and at this point, I'm going to just delete this item because I don't really want that item. I want to start over. It was a failed macro attempt. So this is where the If it doesn't, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And so I will do that. Tools, macro, record, and I'm going to overwrite the one that I had because that one I want to throw away anyway. And then cards, inventory, item. Good thing is my autocomplete is now there, so save and then close the window and tools, macro, stop record. Okay, so we have our seed macro. And down here where I hit the lookup button, I really didn't want to do that. I had the wrong number in here, so I can go ahead and just edit that out. So when I go to item maintenance vendors, and it opens this window here, but this was a failed attempt at typing the numbers, so I can just get rid of that piece. So now it has the right numbers in it, and I can save as fixed. So next step is to get some data for our macro. So what item numbers do we want to add? I'm just going to go into Excel real quick and create some sample data for us to work with. And let's see, we'll do item number. And in here we'll put ABC 0001 and then ABC 002 just to quickly get some data in here, and then we'll select these two and then we'll autofill down to, we're just going to do 24 items. And then save this file, put it on my desktop, and this is going to be webinar sample data. Okay, so there we've got some data. You could have a column for each field that you want to put into your seed macro. We're just going to do item number for today. So we have that. Next thing to do is grab my fixed macro contents and copy it to the clipboard. So I copy that text and then I start up Word. And paste in the contents from my seed macro. So we can see this clearly. We're going to change all of it to be no spacing so that we can see everything. And these squiggly lines here you can ignore. I should have turned those off, and it's very noisy when you're trying to spell correct a macro. But if we look at this, right here's our item number. So that's the data we want to get from Excel. So really that's what we're going to do, is a mailing merge of type letters. So you can do email, message, envelope, label, directory, but letters is the key. Pick letters. And once we have this set up to mail merge letters, the select recipient says, type a new list, and I don't feel like typing all those items. Use an existing list is your friend here. So you want to use an existing list. Even though it's an Excel file, they call it a list. And so then I believe I had that on my desktop, webinar sample. When I pick that, it says here are the sheets within your view, and I had sheet 1. That's the one I want. So this tick right here, I call it a tick. It's like an apostrophe, but it's not really an apostrophe, because if you type an apostrophe in Word, you get this crooked thing, which the macro language does not interpret as a tick. So you can't just go in here and type tick webinar test and expect it to work as a text file. What you have to do is you need to select between the ticks and not the ticks themselves, or it will not work, and you'll have trouble getting those ticks back. So once I have this area selected, now I want to replace that with a merge field item number, and then it looks like that. Perfect. And since I have Rob Test as my item description, I want to have Rob Test plus my item number. So I'm combining some text with a mail merge here. And so that's a very simple example that should work. Now I click Mail, Finish and Merge, and then obviously sending these to the printer is not a good idea because you're not going to print them. You're going to play them back. So Edit Individual Documents is your friend here. You want to pick that one. You'll be presented with a dialog box, and you can start at a different record, but we want to do them all. And what you get now is ABC01, and then ABC02, ABC03, all the way through to 24. So a Word macro to create a Word mail merge to create a macro. So then we copy all of the contents here and go back to the one that we had just recorded and paste over that with this new text. And at the bottom here, we should be on number 23. Yep. So then I like to, and I recommend that you don't overwrite your seed macro because you can use that again later. I always give it a different name because I'm not going to play back the seed. I always put in results at the end of it and then save it. So now we have our work has been done. I believe we can just go and Tools, Macro, Play, and pick our macro that we had just saved. And with any luck, not luck, but with preparation for the seed macro being a set of unique operations, it should work. However, ABC001 already exists. So what happened there? Let me look at ABC001. ABC002. Okay, so that didn't work. So what I would like to do is let you know that this does work, and on my demo I didn't have it perfect, but if I were able to get this to work, it would have played through all of those items and entered them into the system. But we're going to try and spend our time wisely. But trust me, this is an approach that will work as long as you get all of the pieces together. What I really want to do is move to the next step and talk about timed automation and show how timed automation will work. This is the example from one of our customers who agreed to demonstrate how they are using automation to free up their time. And so let me go into this tool. This is a way that an automation is being generated to run on a timer. And so the application is outside of Dynamics GP, but it's feeding a mail merge. So I'm going to go enter some data here into the system that that sets the timer automation in play. And you can imagine how your business deals with data and how that can be entered outside of the system, but then actually used in an automation. So I just entered an MO receipt for MO68, and we're putting in a roll, and this is what it weighs. So that's going to actually work over here. So we need to come back over here, and oh, look at that. It was too fast. So let's close this and see what happened here. We have this screen here, and there's a timer set up to run for my user ID. My user ID SA, it has a timer that runs every minute, and it looks for mail merge type opportunities to put receipts into the system. And so what this is, a robot that's sitting outside of the human world that does human-like activities. And in this case, it does manufacturer orders, it does receipts, and it also does sales orders. So the advantage to this is you'll notice that the screen came up with extender windows. Now those windows, in order to get those populated, you can do it through typing, but you can't do that through an integration manager or through web service or things like that. So an automation can deal with any customized data. So we're going to skip the manufacturer automation. All that one does is it takes data from Excel and creates a manufacturing order for it. And the next one is a shipping application that is used to create sales orders. So in this case, I can select which things are going on to a truck, and it's going to ship out the door, and we want to create a sales order for that those finished goods. Rather than going through the system, we're using this tool to automate our sales invoice process. And the difference between the timer event is turned off for this one. You'll see right here that this box is turned off and there's no user assigned. So that's just a difference in how it's been set up for this customer, because they don't want this data to be timed. They want it to be manually chosen when it's to be run. So then if we go actions and run SO automation, then here we have the data that I had just entered for our shipping application, which puts the items on the truck. Automatically, all of the roles which go into that are added to the sales order, thereby reducing the amount of time that it takes to actually sell the product and to your customer. So in this case, it's going through and adding all of the lots that equal the sum of the items that are currently shipping. And I just had a couple examples here. I picked a couple of item numbers. But in the past, the user would have to go through and look up or type in all of these lot numbers that consume 209,043 pounds of finished good that's being sold. And so that did not get posted. So what we can do now is go back into sales and pull up that batch that was created for today for my user. and review that invoice. This isn't the same one that we were looking at, but you can see that all the data has been played in to the system. Okay, back to our slides. I want to wrap up and get you guys to ask your questions here. So what are the pros and cons of automation? They're fast, they're flexible, reusable. And what are the cons of automation? It's transactional. It's time consuming to figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it, and making sure that it's not faster to do it manually than it is to come up with that. Time consuming, meaning it actually requires the application to be running. And even though it runs very fast, it's not as fast as a direct SQL integration. It's completely predictive. I think of that as a con because it wasn't able to stop and ask me for data. It had to be upfront. So you can't say, if this, then I want this to do that. You have to tell the macro what to do at the time you're doing it. And where do we go? Where do we go now? These are questions that you can ask yourself. Which macro type makes sense to me? Do I want to use the startup macro? Do I want to use a quick command? Do I want to use a mail merge? Do I want to use an auto list or a timer preference? And where can I save valuable time? Is there room for improvement in my organization where I have a person whose job is completely consumed with doing this manual task? Can I help them out, thereby making their job more enjoyable? Is there room for improvement? The key common pitfalls we talked about were not to use lookups, follow a single step approach, and the last one is an example of when you go through a step and you didn't expect that this macro is going to fail for this reason. Perhaps your inventory is out of stock when you go to create it, and a new dialog comes back, and it will not play through that because you didn't anticipate that you were going to be out of stock. So that was the presentation that I had. We're at 50 minutes now, and what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity to ask questions if you have them, and certainly, if you don't feel like you want to speak up on the call today, you can reach out to me directly at this number or any one of us on the team here to help you with automations. I always call it a way to look like a rock star. You'll get more done by using this tool than you normally would. The other thing to notice is that with automation practice, you can become an expert, and that's what we all want to be when working with Dynamics GP. So at this time, I'm going to attempt to turn on all of the audience's chat capability. And so, do that. Now you should be able to speak up if someone could tell me if they can hear us. I apologize. I'm trying to figure out how to get you guys all off of mute here. Okay, well, it doesn't appear that I can get this off of mute. I apologize for that. However, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you again for spending your time. I will take phone calls, questions, emails, anything that you have on automation, and I would love to help you be more successful. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.